I'm just sitting here sipping on my dandy blend. It's a nice caffeine-free coffee substitute. It's delicious. Anyway, I wanted to talk about Tang Soo Do, the martial art that I take, and why I have confidence in Tang Soo Do as a system of self-defense versus newer systems of self-defense like Krav Maga or Sistema or things of that nature. So I've been taking Tang Soo Do essentially since I was 10 years old. I've had a hiatus, but I haven't stopped practicing the techniques, particularly the kicks, to continue to have the flexibility in my hips and legs. I'm still basically as flexible as I was when I was 16. I can't still do a full straddle like I used to be able to, but I can get damn close. But the thing is, Tang Soo Do is a system of martial arts that was created by a Korean named Hwang Ki. Now, Hwang Ki, he based his system, Tang Soo Do, off of Okinawan karate, most likely Shotokan karate. We're not sure what kind of Okinawan karate, though the forms appear to be very similar to Shotokan, or the karate of Gichin Funakoshi. He also learned Kung Fu in, I believe it's Northern Shaolin Kung Fu is the form of Kung Fu that's involved in Tang Soo Do. American boxing, Aikido, and Akijutsu, as well as some of the Korean, the pre-Tang Soo Do Korean martial arts like Subak and things of that nature. Tang Soo Do is a complete martial art that involves the whole range of fighting, kicking, punching, joint locks, finger locks, things of that nature. What primarily makes Tang Soo Do different from Taekwondo is Tang Soo Do makes use of open-handed attacks like thumb drives into the eyes, U-joints to the throat, chops to, karate chops or judo chops or things of that nature. And these techniques are not supposed to be present necessarily in traditional Taekwondo, which is basically, what I mean by not present in Taekwondo, I don't mean that the techniques are not in Taekwondo, but they're not in Taekwondo necessarily outside of the hyungs, the forms. Whereas in Tang Soo Do, we use the whole body as a weapon. We use the head, we use the elbows, we use the fists, we use the feet, we use the knees, we use the shins. We use everything that the body has as a weapon. Whereas in Taekwondo, generally speaking, the form of fighting that they favor is just fists and feet. Now, I've taught and I've practiced point fighting, which is a semi-contact form of free fighting that takes place in karate tournaments, basically based off of Shotokan rules. Now, the thing is, that's only fists and feet, okay? And no punching to the face, but you can kick to the side of the head and stuff like that. Now, in black belt level, you can punch to the face, but you're not allowed to make contact. One of the biggest advantages that Tang Soo Do has over other martial arts is the use of Il-Soo-Sik Daryun. Il-Soo-Sik Daryun is one-step hand and foot techniques. And what these techniques are is basically pre-programmed attacks against a punch or a kick. And then we have, or a knife. Well, it goes beyond that, because you have the Il-Soo-Sik, the hand-to-hand Il-Soo-Sik, which are one-step fight. They're basically unarmed counterattacks to a kick or a punch. Then we have similar things against a knife and against a club and against like a baseball bat or a bokken or a sword. So these techniques are very good at gaining confidence in one's technique. And I'm going to get into why the strengths and the weaknesses of pressure testing And what pressure testing is pressure testing is popular in a lot of these newer forms of martial arts like Krav Maga and these combative systems. And I'm a fan of pressure testing, but truth be told, I know people that have never pressure tested outside of free fighting. And what free fighting is just fighting. It's semi-contact free sparring. Okay? It's not, usually in karate, we're not trying to kill our classmates. It's not like boxing or something like that. It's semi-contact. We're not hitting as hard as we can. We're not trying to knock the guy out. We're just fighting. So I know people that have not really had any real pressure testing for their techniques, but have done very well in real-life self-defense situations. The reverse of that is I know people that have taken Krav Maga and have received an overabundance of pressure testing and a lack of education and the application of self-defense techniques, that have done very poorly in a self-defense situation and have done very poorly, generally speaking, as far as martial arts are concerned. So what I'm getting at here is the advantages of Il Su Sik mixed with free fighting allows for the practitioner to develop technique and confidence with technique, which can be applied in real life, whereas an over-reliance on pressure testing basically results in spaz outs. I've dealt with this in working with people when my instructor was creating a course for Sky Marshals. We were working with a practitioner of Krav Maga. And essentially what Krav Maga is, I'm not judging it all around. Krav Maga essentially, from what I've discovered, Krav Maga is essentially whatever the Israeli combat instructor is teaching the unit that he's teaching. It can be judo, it can be this, it can be that. But as far as Krav Maga was concerned, when we were doing this course, Krav Maga is essentially you spaz out and you go all out, and you don't care about the technique, and you just go crazy. Long story short, that doesn't work. It does not work. I know this for a fact. Okay? I've gotten a bloody nose, but I've not been, and I would like to say that I've also trained with other people that take Krav Maga. Krav Maga does not seem to be a sufficient form of self-defense if it's being used against a martial artist. Okay? So I would say Krav Maga versus Tang Soo Do, not going to happen. Krav Maga versus a decent Taekwondo practitioner, not going to happen. Krav Maga versus a boxer, definitely not going to happen. Okay? So my point is that's an over-reliance on pressure testing and an under-reliance on building confidence in the technique that the person is practicing. Now, Il Su Sik, which is a systematic approach to teaching techniques. A punch comes at you, you do this. A kick comes at you, you do this. And there's about 51 of them. Okay? That's 51 ways to defend yourself against a kick or a punch. You might not remember all of them, but you don't need to remember all of them. You just need to do them. And this is where the Korean concept of mushim comes in, which is mind, no mind. By drilling Il Su Sik, one programs oneself to react as opposed to think. You're not spazzing out, you're reacting calmly. And this goes back to the ideas of the Hwarang Knights of Silla, the kingdom of Silla in the Korean peninsula. And what it was, although they promoted Confucianism in the kingdom of Silla, the Buddhism and the Buddhist meditations, which in the beginning of every Tang Soo Do class, you do the 5 codes and 7 tenets, and you bow to the Grand Master, which is a photo of the Grand Master. We didn't do that in ours because we were more Americanized. And then you have a few seconds for what's called mukyam, or meditation, which is how you reach mushim, mind, no mind. which is where you're reacting. This is a popular concept in Chan Buddhism, or Zen Buddhism as it's become known, but in China it's Chan Buddhism. And this is what was promoted by the Hurang Knights. This is what is still promoted in Tang Soo Do. A lot of Taekwondo schools, well, there's two ways you can look at Taekwondo. Taekwondo can be seen as a sport where it's being taught essentially as a means of ring fighting and forms. Then there's and now with that, you're not going to have a lot of emphasis on the mokyam, on the 5 codes and 7 tenets, which they still have because they're the 5 codes and 7 tenets of the Hurang Knights, and the Student's Creed. In Tang Soo Do, the mental outlook is highly stressed with loyalty to country, obedience to parents, honor, friendship, and so on and so forth, and yada da da da. Student Creed, I will develop myself in a positive manner, avoid anything that would reduce my mental growth or physical health, develop self-discipline in order to help myself and others, yada yada yada. So there's a heavy emphasis on the warrior constitution in Tang Soo Do that's not there. It's not there in Krav Maga. It's not there in Taekwondo. Now, there's good and bad in every martial art. And in order for a martial arts school to stay in business, sometimes people get promoted that shouldn't be promoted. And I did another video about why somebody can be exceptionally good at karate while being exceptionally bad at fighting. And I'm going to look for that video, and I'll leave a link to that video in the description if I can find it. And the reason why is because a lot of the techniques, you can master the techniques and all this stuff and not have the oomph to deliver them from a lack of conditioning, a lack of calisthenics and things of that nature. So that's another reason. Now, the reason I have confidence in Tang Soo Do versus more modern forms of combat, such as Krav Maga, is that I've seen Tang Soo Do in action, I've been Tang Soo Do in action, and I know what Tang Soo Do is capable of. What I suggest instead of pressure testing, now what pressure testing can mean different things to different people. Sometimes it's just resisting at full force, which is something that we would do occasionally in class, but you don't want to hurt your classmates, so you have to be careful with that. So there's a couple different ways to do pressure testing. Some of it is done with, yelling, where you point at the person and yell at them and test them, and you got to wear a lot of padding and all this stuff, and I think that's good. I think that you need to take into consideration that fighting is more than kicking and punching. There's a lot involved in fighting. There's spatial awareness. There's personological awareness. We have to be, or interpersonal awareness, being aware of your adversary, being aware of their intentions. There's communication skills, nonverbal communication skills, verbal communication skills, etc. I think a lot of schools that stress these things overstress them. Okay? That's my problem with it. We used to teach this, and I don't know if they still do it. The school that I went to, I doubt it. It was more so something we would teach during women's self-defense seminars. And a women's self-defense seminar is great as an introduction to martial arts. It's not great on its own. There's a limit to what you're going to accomplish teaching somebody for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. So a woman's self-defense seminar is a great introduction to the martial arts, but it is not a substitute for a martial arts class. That's another problem with combatives. Combatives are excellent, but they don't cover the full range of what you need to know. Now, what do I mean by it's overstressed? This verbal communication, nonverbal communication, situational awareness. They overstress it to the point, similar to Krav Maga, where if you look at these schools that claim to be self-defense oriented, they're too busy teaching you about things like situational awareness and verbal and nonverbal communication and nonverbal and verbal cues and all this crap that you start to lose track of what martial arts is about, which is about fighting. It's named after Mars, the god of war. And if you're not teaching things like controlling time, which means being aggressive enough that you're the one controlling the fight. If you're attacked, you want to gain control of the fight. Closing the gap, or at no man's land. Different techniques to use against different techniques. How to do heel picks and things like that, which I learned in jiu-jitsu, not Tang Soo Do. But the thing is, you have to be able to know how to fight, what techniques to use to surprise a person, how to counterattack if you're attacked, different self-defense techniques, like what do you do if somebody puts you in a headlock? What do you do if somebody puts you in a rear naked choke? What do you do if somebody grabs you by the hair? What do you do if somebody grabs you by the ear? And a lot of people think that this is, oh, well, this doesn't work if you do that. No, it does work. You just got to do it. What do you do if somebody holds a knife to your back? What do you do if somebody tries to stab you? You got to know what you're doing. And a lot of these techniques are tested, especially in American Tang Soo Do systems, where a lot of the people that basically originated American Tang Soo Do were, Korean War veterans, Vietnam War veterans, that were the ones responsible for normalizing. And prior to that, we had a lot of that was also the World War II veterans that brought in the actual combatives, the actual extremely effective combatives, which I was taught because they were taught in my Tang Soo Do classes, because my instructor was a Marine combat instructor. And it's very important that you know that. One of the things is, if you're in a grappling situation, my instructor would what's his name? Oh, I forget his name off the top of my head. There's a famous pro wrestler. He taught Ronda Rousey, and you grab a handle and you pull, whether that handle's the nose or a lip or an ear or an eye socket, or you jam your finger in the person's eye, or it's the nostrils or whatever. You do something, and you do something with it. If it's a situation, you do something, and you do something with it. That you don't need to teach all this non-verbal and verbal and eye contact and no eye contact, and a lot of this stuff just gets very, very confusing. Now, my instructor would be very disappointed if he heard me say this, which is why I hope he doesn't watch my YouTube videos, although I think he does. My instructor is a pressure points expert, and I've learned all sorts of pressure points, and they do work, especially in jiu-jitsu. They work. You can get out of holds sometimes by using pressure points because they're not expecting a pressure point. Unfortunately, if you get caught, they're illegal in many in jiu-jitsu competition. But like my instructor, he's a pressure points expert. I'm not a fan of pressure points. I've had too many experiences where they don't work, and I've had experiences where they don't work on me. They personally don't work on me. That's why I'm a bigger fan of joint locks and breaking of joints and things. Now, of course, he taught me that also, but he's a big believer and a big practitioner of pressure point fighting. And as much as I respect acupressure, and I think it can be used with limited success in healing, I haven't found it to be that beneficial in fighting. However, the application of Dimok, which is present in any form of martial arts. If you want to know what Dimok is, look up the karate striking points. Look up karate striking points poster from the 80s or 70s or 60s or whatever it was. And what Dimok is what they now call it. It's the death touch. It's not really a death touch. It's just applying martial techniques properly. It's about hitting the cavity centers, like the cranial, boom, right to the temple. You're going to hit like the sinuses, the philtrum, the nose, the throat, boom, 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 boom. The arteries here. Wherever there's a hollow, the chest cavity, the abdominal cavity, the pelvic cavity, which contains the testes, which is a very vulnerable target, the kidneys. There's a lot of striking points that, if you hit them and you hit them good and hard, or you hit them properly, you can incapacitate, cripple, or kill somebody. It's not difficult. That's what Dimmock is, outside of the pressure points. The pressure points get a little bit hokey. And this manner of fighting we do teach to the military. Okay, that is regularly taught to the military. This is also taught in karate. If you buy the Marine Corps handbook on hand-to-hand combat, I believe is what it's called, it's virtually the same thing as karate without any of the nonsense. Okay? So when I say Tang Soo Do, I'm using the word Tang Soo Do interchangeably with the word karate. Why am I doing that? Why am I using the word Tang Soo Do interchangeably with karate or karate? Well, the thing is, both karate and Tang Soo Do mean the way of the Chinese hand. Many people don't know that. Many people think karate means the way of the empty hand. They're right. How are they right? Well, in Okinawa, karate can mean way of the Chinese hand, but it was Japanified or Japaneseized to mean way of the empty hand to make it more Japanese, to make it more nationalistic, because there was a nationalistic surge in Japan at the time, and the Ryukyu Islands, Japan was basically exercising dominance over the Ryukyu Islands, which is where Okinawa is. And if karate wanted to be accepted in mainland Japan, they would have to become nationalistic. And you certainly don't want to be calling something the way of the Chinese hand in mainland Japan. The Japanese and the Chinese are not very friendly with one another. So, my confidence in Tang Soo Do versus other martial arts, and I would say even versus other forms of karate, and the reason I say that is the one main benefit of Tang Soo Do, it has a curriculum. The only other form of martial art that I know that has such a stringent curriculum, where if you go to this school, or this school, or that school, or that school, or, the school over here, or the school over there, you are taught the same thing. The only other form of karate that I know that is like that is American Kempo. Ed Parker's American Kempo. Generally speaking, if you learn Taekwondo from this or that school, unless they're really sticking to that curriculum, you might learn 5 different systems of Taekwondo. If you learn Shotokan Karate, you might learn 5 or 6 different systems of Shotokan Karate, depending on the schools you go to. So the one main benefit of Tang Soo Do is it has a stringently adhered to curriculum, regardless of whether you're going to this school or that school or this school or that school. It doesn't matter if you go to a World Tang Soo Do school, a Karate Institute of America school, or what have you. The schools teach relatively the same curriculum. Where you might have it a little odder is if you're going to a more traditional Korean, not an American karate or an American Tang Soo Do school, but if you're going to a more Koreanized school, you might have, the forms might be a tiny bit different, but the techniques are generally the same. The other somewhat minor detail is if you go to a school that doesn't favor self-defense more. The thing with Tang Soo Do is stuck on cultivating the warrior spirit of the Hwarang, the flowering youth. And I was going to do a whole video on the Hwarang and what I think of the Hwarang and how adherence to the values of the Hwarang could help save America. Now, what Hwarang means is the flowering youth, which were the young noble people and young noble men. And there was another one, I forget the name of it off the top of my head, that stands for noble women, which predated the Hwarang It's Hua something, and it's for young ladies. It was about the female Korean shamanesses. They were like that was before the Hwarang that created the fighting arts of Korea. Um, but the point is it's Tung Sudo is stuck on that cultivation of the warrior mindset, the warrior ethic, the warrior value system, etc. So if you get a school that doesn't favor self-defense, you might not get enough education in actual fighting. It might be more dedicated to forms. It might be more dedicated to other aspects of the curriculum, philosophical aspects. And what you want to get aware, like the situational awareness and all this stuff. Uh, my instructor explained to me. I'm not going to tell you the name of the dojo system. It was a ninjutsu system or ninpo system or whatever they call it. And he was talking about how he went to some, back in the 80s, he went to some martial arts free-for-all gathering. And all this situational awareness and all this crap they're talking, and this is the thing, when you get way into this hippie crap, even the way that the wind blows depends on how you throw the technique and all this stuff. So they're explaining this, and my instructor used to joke. He would say, "So I grabbed the son of a bitch by the neck and I ninja'd him the hell out of there." Okay, that was a popular joke. I don't believe it took, I forget the story exactly. But the thing is, if you get too overwhelmed with these peripheral things like, oh, when the sun shines and the moon glitters and the grasshopper hops, and you start losing context of fighting, of actually knowing how to fight, how to throw a punch, how to throw a kick, how to break an arm, how to break a leg, how to break a neck, how to cave in somebody's skull. These are things that you can learn if it's being taught. And unfortunately, it's not being taught enough, and a lot of times there's favoritism to some of the more goofier things. And you get this too in a lot of, there's a lot of this karate for Christ crap and Jesus martial arts. And there are some, actually, believe it or not, there are some kick-ass Christian martial arts schools with kick-ass martial arts instructors that are all Bible-based. I'm not even going to lie. That actually, as ridiculous as that sounds, it's not a lie. But the thing is, there are some that use that to teach the values of Christianity through the martial arts, and then there are some that use martial arts as an excuse to fill people's heads with all sorts of non-violence, passivity, and all sorts of garbage from Christianity. So you got to be aware of everything, and I don't know. That's just my rant about why I trust Tung Sudo over other martial arts, particularly over combatives, some of these new combatives like Krav Maga. And that's all for this video.